This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Doc, one of our great sponsors is the Detroit Sports Commission. Now, since 2001, the Detroit Sports Commission has applied its expert touch to marketing and to selling the Metro Detroit area as a marquee destination for regional, national, and even international amateur sporting events. And through the Detroit Sports Commission's help, these events have attracted thousands of visitors and pumped millions of dollars into our local economy. It is why Detroit is now not only the place where champions are made, but also the place where championships are played. To find out more about the Detroit Sports Commission and all of the events they are bringing to our very region, please follow the DSC on Twitter and also on Instagram at DET Sports. And make sure to check out their fine website at detroitsports.org. And welcome to the latest, the freshest edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. I am your host, Vito Geronimo, Jerome Chirco, along to my usual sidekick and partner in crime. That is the Doc from Doc and Jack, John Charles Macaroon. John, how's it going?
Vito, I'm looking forward to the second half of the podcast. You'll get a chance to recap what it was like to go and be a part of and watch a baseball game at one of the storied Major League Baseball stadiums in the entire world, Wrigley Field. I was shocked that you went there, and then at the same time, very cool, Alex Avila hit a home run. His first one with the Chicago Cubs, so stay tuned later on in this podcast. Vito will break it down, and it's always good to record a podcast with you. Others are tired of talking about the Tigers. I mean, I try and rile it up with Jason a little bit. He's already moved on to football. A lot of fans are just like, watching the Tigers, not a lot of great news. And I say to myself, what? How could you skip over talking about baseball, talking about the Tigers? Even though, Vito, the Tigers aren't playing that well, I still am invested. There's so many great storylines, so many great things that happen, and so many not so great things that happened in the last week. And so for me, I'm like, man, how do you take a break from talking Tigers? I probably could talk about them for an hour every single day. I wish I had more time to. What a fascinating week it was this last week in terms of the turnover, what we've seen with different ball players, and I'm still invested in seeing what these guys got left.
Well, you know what? They haven't played that bad of late either. Now, they took a series against the Astros, took a series against the Yankees. Now, they split a series 4-game set with the Orioles over the weekend. Now have lost 3 in a row, though. They lost the last 2 against the Orioles and the opener of a home-and-home series, a 4-game set against the Pittsburgh Pirates, starting off on the road in Pittsburgh, against the Buccos, who are an underachieving team as well. And when I say as well, I mean because the Tigers are. And we know that. We know that much about the Tigers this season. And a lot of flaws, though, a myriad of problems, of issues. It's the reason why they dealt J.D. Martinez. It's the reason why they dealt Justin Wilson and Alex Avila. And you brought up a little bit, segueing into the second half of this week's podcast, and a little bit of a recap of Chicago and my trip there this past weekend that I'll do on Two Bad Hombres this week. That podcast drops on Saturday. But for all intensive purposes regarding Tigers Talk, in episode 102, by the way, of Tigers Talk, we will get into a little bit about my experience at Wrigley Field, you're right, in the second half. And it was Alex Avila's first home run, you said, in a Cubbies uniform. Also his first hit as a Cub I saw on Saturday at Wrigley Field. Fun atmosphere, lively, and we'll talk more about it in the second half of this week's podcast, too.
Now, Vito, many people are looking at it when they talk about the Detroit Tigers. They have to, and we have to talk about Justin Verlander, Miguel Cabrera. Reports keep swirling, and let's start with Justin Verlander. Reports keep swirling that potentially the Astros have kind of called Al Avila and had said, look, what can we do? Because now the general manager over there in Houston has taken a ton of heat for not making moves because the Astros have been scuffling. And one of their star players, Chirco, came out and was like, yeah, I'm disappointed. We didn't make any moves. And when you look at it for the Astros, it doesn't make sense right now that they could pull off a move because the Tigers, knowing that we're in the waiver trade deadline period, they're going to ask for a significant piece from the Astros. And I feel like I understand that the Astros are inquiring, but I don't see a move being made this year for Justin Verlander. John Morosi keeps putting out these articles and getting traction on them, but many people, many other writers are saying, look, yeah, the talks are happening, but they're not going beyond talks. And the likelihood of him, being with the team the rest of this year is pretty high. That many people should just start to realize that the wintertime will be the time if the talks start to fire back up regarding moving Justin Verlander. I think that's probably the most realistic way we can look at it is, yeah, of course teams are going to call. He cleared the revocable waivers. Nobody picked him up, obviously, because nobody wanted to take on the majority of that contract. So it's one of those things where people got a little bit concerned and people asked us, like, what does that mean? But most of the time, these players are put on waivers all the time, and they clear them. So now any team can make a claim for Justin Verlander or make a trade for him. So do I see it happening? No. I understand what John Morosi's doing. He's reporting the news that he hears, but it seemed like to me, the talk last week and the hullabaloo regarding Justin Verlander being traded to the Astros, not a whole heck of a lot of seriousness behind it.
Not a lot of serious steam to it. A lot of just blowing steam up our behinds, right? About, speculation that the Astros are interested that a trade, if it were to happen, would happen with the Astros, who maybe are desperate to make a move now because of Keuchel coming out and calling out his team, his front office, for not making a move at this year's non-waiver trade deadline, when the Astros are a team the best in the AL this season that should have maybe made a deal to enhance the top of the rotation to make a run this year in the playoffs. They did not make that move, and the funny thing kind of is, though, is that Dallas Keuchel is the ace right now of that rotation. Now, he had an off year last year, a good year the year before, and he really is a Cy Young candidate when he is pitching as well as he has this year. He has shown that this season consistently. The funny thing, though, is that really if they were to deal for Justin Verlander, he is your ace now of that rotation. He gets supplanted as the Astros rotation. And the reason why they might make a move still is for that rotation piece that can be a top of the rotation arm. So it's kind of funny, he's calling out the Astros for not making a move, and really the only move the Astros would have made, well, maybe to enhance their bullpen, but the big scale move they would have made was to get an ace caliber arm to supplant Dallas Keuchel as their staff ace.
So where do you stand on it? I think we've talked about it in the past. Justin Verlander, by all accounts, is likely to be shopped around, maybe with another year under his belt with the Tigers with less money that could potentially be paid out. Maybe there's a likelihood of a move being made in the offseason. What is your thoughts regarding the likelihood that Justin Verlander finishes out his career with the Detroit Tigers? If you were to give it a percentage, would you say 50% that he stays with the Tigers, 50% that he is actually traded in the offseason?
It's around that 45 to 55% range, but I would say that there is definitely, with that being said, you can tell I think there is definitely a chance, but it's still about a team being able and willing to take on some of that salary for next year and the year after that, as he's a Tiger until 2019 as part of his current contract. It's an albatross of a deal right now for a guy that has a 4-something ERA, hasn't pitched effectively in the long haul of this season, and you want to see more of what he did last year on a consistent basis the rest of this season and in 2018 and beyond, as he is a Tiger once again until at least 2019. And the thing is, at 34 right now, will he retire as a Tiger? Once his contract does expire, let's see he lasts all the rest of this contract with the Tigers, the remainder of the contract. Well, would he resign with the Tigers or just retire at the end of his contract when it does expire after 2019? But to answer your question again more clearly or specifically, I would say there's a 60% chance at best that he is dealt. Now, that's over 50%, but I think it's more in that range, once again, of 45 to 55. So I think the Tigers still aren't even sure. So how are we going to be sure? I don't think they're sure about what they want to do in the approach or direction they're going in, besides for doing salary dumpings, taking dumpings in terms of salary. Because from what I saw with Cameron Maybin when they dealt him, it was a salary dump. With JD Martinez, it was a thing where they just got something really for a guy they knew they were going to lose in free agency anyways. So I guess I want to see, how serious they are about rebuilding. And we'll find out this offseason, because you're not going to really see a deal made now that, we're in the waiver part of trade season. It's very hard. Big deals typically don't happen. And Justin Verlander, for his sake, a deal will not happen now, and it will happen in the offseason if it does actually even occur, Doc.
So the Tigers last week, they won 4 games in a row. Some people started to maybe ramp up and started again to believe regarding, the likelihood that the Tigers could succeed and maybe even make a run because of the fact that the Central is not, unattainable. But at the same time, then you had the end of the week where you had Anibal Sanchez, you had Drew Verhagen in the final 2 games in the series versus Baltimore. You won the first 2 games. You were pitching well. You were playing well. Then you throw out kind of the scrubs of the rotation, and the Tigers didn't look all that great. The old Anibal showed up. So many people saw it, and now they've lost 3 in a row now. and you're watching the team, and you go, oh, one hit versus Pittsburgh. They ruined a pretty decent performance by Jordan Zimmerman, and you go, man, there's some other news that we got to talk about regarding Michael Fulmer and some of the concerns that I had. But what was your reaction, first and foremost, when they won the 4 games in a row?
I didn't care because you know what? This season they're not going to win anything. They're not going to win the division. They're not going to make the playoffs. So
you didn't care.
You would rather have them tank and lose every single game the rest of the way and get a high draft pick than having them win this year.
A little punk.
In a year where it doesn't matter for them to win. So maybe I'm a little punk because I don't care about the Tigers winning now, and I'm the host of Tigers Talk.
I don't like you, and you don't like me.
I don't like the Tigers winning is what I don't like. I like everybody out there. I'm nice to everybody, right? Doc knows that. The DOC knows that. But in the nicest way possible for me to say it, I want to see the Tigers tank and be miserable the rest of this season, and next year be pretty darn bad as well, to be in contention for a top draft pick in the amateur draft. Why not contend for that? Compete for that, because right now they're not competing for a division crown by any stretch. They're way out of it. They're not going to win a playoff spot via the wild card, 2 wild cards in the American League either. There's no way, Jose. They're just not good enough, and they're not positioned to do so after dealing JD and then Justin Wilson and Alex Avila. A lot of their offense and the biggest component of their bullpen up to the point in which they traded Justin Wilson. So for me, I want to see them lose. So them, putting together a win streak and sustaining some winning the rest of the way this season, I think as Tigers fans, we don't want to see that, or we should not. We at least should not want to see that happen from the Tiger stock.
Yeah, see, a lot of people are saying the same things. People are saying that, let's build through the minor league system. There are now more talented individuals in the minors, and if you peek at the minors,
it looks better. It's not as barren, at least.
It's not as barren, but one of the young players that was involved in the trade for Justin Wilson is now brought up, and I'm a little frustrated, and I'm going to play you a clip because I think me and Jason had a little debate about it, and I probably do sound a little bit irrational, but bringing up Candelario was great. Okay, fine. Jose Iglesias not in the lineup because of bereavement, and I'm very sorry for whatever's been going on with Jose Iglesias in his personal life. But now you got a young asset, a young guy that was doing pretty much okay, nothing spectacular in the minors, but he was doing some things. He was in the minors, and now he's brought up first 2 games back. He's not in the lineup. How concerned are you, or am I being irrational that at least they should play him?
You are very irrational because guys that get called up from the minors don't typically play right away. Remember John Hicks, when he was recently recalled, didn't play right away. And guys, even of the higher caliber prospect level, like a Jeimer Candelario, a guy that you want to see get some major league game action. Well, he will eventually, but they have to play it safe, be conservative as much as possible with them. And I see Ausmus doing that, handling the situation safely by not playing him too often. And the thing is, you want to throw him out there, but do you really want to throw him into the fire? And get attacked by all the wolves, as in Major League starting and relief arms that can throw even harder than what he was facing and have multiple or more of an arsenal of pitches than what he was facing in AAA Toledo and back when he was with the Cubs. So for me, I think you have to play it rather conservatively.
Oh, man. So you know what I told Jason? I said I want Candelario to hit a couple home runs. I want him to steal Iglesias' job right away. And Jason took the same stance as you, and here's his rebuttal. He was kind of flabbergasted at my comments.
Coming out here and saying that a prospect that we just traded for needs to come in and steal the starting spot and get 2 home runs in his first game. I leave that to you.
So yeah, that's what I said. I wanted Candelario to be featured. Why bring him up and have him be a bench warmer? All you guys wanted to be conservative. And I know that we got young talent with Lugo, Paredes, Candelario. We got a bunch of young arms in there. Was it crazy for me to think that he was going to be featured in a couple games with the Pittsburgh Pirates? Because at least after the first game, you got 1 hit. You showed no life. Miggy's struggling. Everybody kind of offensively was in a big malaise. You got shut out again by a no-name pitcher. You don't feature Candelario. And so my thinking was, in debating Jason, and my thought was, and I told him, I said, I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want to take the wait-and-see conservative approach. I wanted to see Candelario seize the opportunity and steal Iglesias' job.
Well, he's not going to play shortstop. He's not a shortstop. He's a third baseman and first baseman, corner infielder. Now, he could spell Cabrera at first base, who probably could use a rest day or 2. And Vimar hasn't hit all year long. Cabrera barely has. He's been in a season-long slump himself. An OPS above 700, but not nearly to the standards that we've grown accustomed to with Miguel Cabrera at first base. And Vimar, an OPS below 700.
So if he was going to play, wouldn't he play shortstop?
He would know he'd play third or first, more than likely,
okay.
Jeimer. So he's not going to see. You were thinking that, which makes more sense with Iglesias on bereavement leave, on the bereavement list.
So he's just a bench warmer?
Well, unless you sit Cabrera or Victor Martinez, which they probably should sit one of those guys at this point of the season, and especially when you're not playing for anything, you're not going to win this year. Why not give those guys, your veterans, a rest, a much needed, much deserved, or maybe not much deserved, but much needed day of rest, or 2 or 3 or 8 or 10, or who even cares, because they're not going to win with those guys right now, because Cabrera and Vimar haven't really hit that great this year, especially Vimar, but Cabrera hasn't hit that well himself, as we've talked about and harped on many times throughout Tigers Talk this season. And he has to turn it around in 2018, or you start fearing that Cabrera's contract, man, is one you have to sit with and realize that you're never going to get from under the rest of his tenure in a Tigers uni, which does last until 2023. His contract does not expire until then. So imagine a guy hitting like he has this season, hitting to this standard now the rest of his career in a Tigers uniform, or even to a less caliber. What if he becomes even more decreasingly productive at the plate? Think about that, what you would have to deal with. That would then be hugely an albatross of a contract that you have on your hands with Miguel Cabrera, Doc.
I guess then the question is, Miguel Cabrera was given rest on Sunday, and should that have been extended maybe to 2 or 3 days, because his batting average is well below 260. He's not performing well. Do you spell Miguel Cabrera and put in Candelario?
Or you put Candelario, or you could put Cabrera at DH, you put Candelario at first base, so you still spell Cabrera defensively. Why not do it when Vimar's they're playing below 700?
They're playing a National League team.
And right now you can't, but they'll be going to Comerica Park for the last 2 against the Pittsburgh Pirates. So maybe Wednesday and Thursday. Let's see if Ausmus does do that, because I would say Ausmus should be pulling the trigger. Because you don't want, at the same time, I know what your point is. If you're going to bring up the guy, let's be aggressive about it and get him some PT. Let's see what he can do in the lineup, because other guys aren't, and you're not going to win this year anyways with those guys in your lineup. So get this young prospect some reps at the plate, which, are much needed. He doesn't have a lot of Major League playing experience. And the thing is, returning home to Comerica Park, you have that DH slot now opened up potentially if you do intend on sitting Victor Martinez. Give him a day or 2. If you do that, you can put Cabrera still in the lineup at DH, and you slide Candelario into first base. Why not do that at this point, right? Because you don't want to see him be called up like he has and then sit for 7 straight games, or 10 straight games. Then it becomes too extreme, because you want to play it conservatively up to a point, to a certain point. But then there is a point where you have to say to yourself, how long can we refuse to play this guy? And I think after 5 or so games, you have to get him some PT, if not earlier in this series with the Pittsburgh Pirates, once the Tigers return home to Comerica Park.
Okay, so I can understand. I guess I have to be a little bit more patient, not be such a fanboy. But I understand it's one of those things where I guess the notion for me is I'm tired of waiting for the prospects. But I know you have to wait. I know that not every prospect is going to be a superstar, can't-miss guy. But I'm just looking at one guy that's making me jealous, and I look at Cody Bellinger over there in the Dodgers, and I go, man, wouldn't it be nice if the Tigers hit on one of these guys and he became a superstar like a Michael Fulmer? That would give us 2 that would come up and be everyday guys that we can come up and be really proud of. And I guess we're kind of grasping for success for the Tigers, wanting some more productivity out of the young caliber prospects. And I can understand where everyone says, look, you got to be patient. If you rush these guys, then potentially you could ruin their confidence. You might be in a situation where you ruin a guy by bringing him up a little too early and not letting him gain confidence and letting him observe a little bit day by day what's going on. So I get your guys' point. I'm just being a little bit excited. I'm just an excitable guy. I want these guys to produce, and I want to see winning baseball.
You're too aggressive at times. Too excitable, maybe, as a fan of the Tigers. More of that than a true pundit, right? A true unbiased guy when deciphering what's going on with the Tigers and what's going wrong. But really quick, Candelario does have Major League playing experience with the Cubs.
Yes.
He did have a cup of Joe or a cup of tea when he was a Chicago Cub. So he has been in the majors before, not productive at all when he was a Cubby. But that was very limited. He's still young. He's still raw. And that's the thing is the question that you have to consider to yourself. When is it too soon to call up a prospect? And how concerned are you with the fact that you could be rushing him to the majors? But I guess you can't be, because he's already been in the majors before when he was a Chicago Cub.
Yeah, so we just want to see the fruits of the labor because Justin Wilson now is with the Cub.
Yep.
We want to see what we got back in return. We want to kind of, like Jason said, I'm excited. I want to unwrap the present and see what we got. And
See, wait until Christmas, though. You're trying to unwrap the present before Christmas happens, pretty much, with Candelario.
well, maybe we'll see how they use him. We'll see if Miguel Cabrera, is going to be rested or what's going to happen with him. But before we talk about that, I think we'll talk about Miggy and your trip to Wrigley in the second half of the podcast. But I'm curious, how did you take what Shane Green has been doing when he was slotted to be the closer? I think he's done an admirable job. He's come out there and gotten saves. And last week, when he was called upon in New York and in Houston, he came out there and was absolutely on fire. He did a great job.
Well, did you know in July, by the way, he allowed no runs in 13 games in 10 2/3 innings out of the Tigers bullpen. So this guy was deserving of the closer spot once Justin Wilson was dealt to the Chicago Cubs. And we've seen an increase in velocity for Green's pitches here and there. He has averaged above 95 miles per hour on his sinker, the fastest that he has consistently thrown that pitch ever in his major league career. That is according to fangraphs.com. And the sinker, by the way, is the pitch that he has thrown the most often this season at over 50% of the time. Now, surprisingly, his four-seam fastball, he has thrown just a little over 5% of the time. Does not throw that fastball very often, but it has clocked in on average around 96 miles per hour this season, which is a career high in average velocity for Green. So, to me, with the depleted bullpen the Tigers are working with, and I think limited options on the farm, at least that are Major League ready right now, including Joe Jimenez, who's up in the majors, but he has struggled mightily. More hits and runs allowed than innings pitched so far as a Tigers reliever. So Jimenez does not deserve the job going into opening day of next season to be the Tigers closer. Rondon, that ship has sailed a long time ago. Him and his candidacy for being the Tigers closer next season. He will never ever be the Tigers closer. Jimenez maybe will be, but I say by mid-season of next year, or he might be pitching in late innings by the midpoint of next season. But him being the closer from opening day on next year, I don't see that happening with Jimenez because I don't think he's ready yet for that role. Shane Green, I think, is the most capable of being that closer come opening day of next season, and I think based on his stats this year, he is deserving of it with the fielding independent pitching mark so far below 4, as well as he has allowed less hits than innings pitched. So that is also mightily impressive out of the 28-year-old right-hander, Shane Green.
I think that there's more than a strong possibility he'll be the closer next year. I got roasted on Twitter yesterday on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast. I said, what's the likelihood that the plan, if we were, spies in the meeting room, that it could be Jimenez, Rondon, Shane Green?
Oh, God, that would be horrible, especially with Rondon at the back end of the game.
That's why. In theory, it sounds good. 3 flamethrowers to lock down a game.
Yeah.
The problem is, and I think that I kind of got a gauge of where people are at, they don't like Rondon, and they
nobody wants to see Rondon ever pitch again in a Tigers uniform after this season, I think.
But he's kind of dialed it back up to 100 miles an hour.
Hey, if you got no accuracy with it, though, right? And no other great pitches to go along with that fastball. And let's see how about the other pitches. Can he get those other pitches over the plate? No, he's not working with anything else.
Another prospect that's come up is Joe Jimenez.
Yep.
And that's, I think, why I'm also kind of craving a prospect to come up and hit. What has everybody been talking about? Who is a prospect that everybody's raving? Look at this guy. He could come up and do some things. We all asked for it. We all thought that Jimenez could be a guy that could come in right away and take his success that he's had in the minors, several innings consecutively of scoreless baseball.
He did at AAA Toledo. Now with the Tigers.
Comes back to the Tigers, gives up a home run in his first appearance, and then, they called upon him, gave him multiple innings, but he gave up some runs, loaded the bases, and yada, yada. And it just goes to show you, it takes a lot of patience to wait on these prospects. And sometimes some fans just don't want to be patient anymore. I'm not the only one.
No, you're not.
I'm not the only one that sometimes is wishing that some of these guys could actually come up and produce. I mean, it's not too much to ask. Hey, why couldn't Jimenez take the success that he had from the minors and bring it up to the major leagues? It's just he's got to learn the art of pitching. I'm not as disappointed as I would have been in years past, but at the same time, I do want to kind of see him in a lot more situations. Let him stick around and let us see what he's actually got.
Patience is a virtue to UDOC and all the Tigers fans out there that want to rush these prospects to the majors and see hugely successful results out of them right away. Jimenez has not produced yet, but he's still young enough to say he might turn it around, probably will, and might be a flame-throwing back end of the pen option come next season. If he is, the Tigers would love that.
And Vito, I might call on you.
Yep.
I might call on you for a project because here's the reason why I think a lot of fans, including myself, are antsy regarding the Tigers and their prospects. Can you name one now off the top of your head, or one that you've seen that has come up through the minor league system and been successful outside of Justin Verlander? A prospect that was developed, cultivated, had a little buzz behind him, came up to the minors and lit it up.
Curtis Granderson, you could say. Joel Zumaya just didn't last. Zumaya, too, he just didn't last. So not many. You're right. Castellanos, but not lit it up. He's all right. He'll be on the team next year. Might end up moving positions eventually at some point in his career because of Jeimer Candelario. But
the reason
overall, wise outside of Verlander, you're right. Not a lot of guys that you can name off right now.
That's why I think the answer. That's why the anxiety level is so high, because we just haven't seen any prospect really make the All-Star team consistently, really do a great job, and come up. And I think it goes to show you this is the result of what happens when you don't cultivate a minor league system, when you deplete it. And I give Dave Dombrowski credit. He was able to realize that, look, these prospects, we can build them up, get the hype train rolling, and ship them off and get talented players. The problem is now, though, the reputation for the Tigers minor league system, and based upon the rankings, was it's a very bottom of the league type of minor league system. But recently, with the last couple drafts, Avila and company have done a better job of stocking the arms, at least. And now with the moves that they made this year, are rebuilding the depth in terms of prospects in the infield. So I know that what they're trying to do, but what Dave Dombrowski was able to do was hype up a Jacob Turner, move them along, hype up guys, and ship them off. And some of them now are sprinkled across Major League Baseball. You hear a couple guys doing some things here and there. But at the same time, you got productive players in return. But you look at it, I think Avila could do a better job of hyping up some of the young guys we got now. But at the same time, I think the philosophy with the organization is, hey, we're going to go younger. We're going to start plucking some of these guys from the minors, and let's see what they got.
It's about retaining those guys right now. They're not going to flip them for major leaguers because they're not trying to win next year.
Right, exactly. So I think that's why I think we've done a good job of kind of talking about why the anxiety level is there. We want to see some prospects do something. It's been years. It's been a long time. But at the same time, I'm still invested. I'm enjoying watching the games. I'm still a little frustrated at the up and down nature of the club. But it was nice to see them win 4 games. It was nice to see Justin Upton destroy the baseball. 2 grand slams in a week's time. My goodness. And it leads me to kind of have the question, and I think people are debating it back and forth mightily, in that, do we want Upton to opt out, or is it better for the long-term health of the ball club if he's not with us next year? I mean, you're starting to think that it's a bargain to get him around $21, $22 million. I think he's performing this way. Obviously, it's a contract year. I think he's going to test the market. I think he's going to opt out, not because he's dissatisfied, but I think he could jump up in the next 5 years. He could probably garner in the neighborhood of $26, $28 million for maybe the next 5-6 years.
Maybe not that much money.
No, you don't think he's in the $25
not
million?
On an annual basis, maybe. We talked about this matter last week on the podcast, Doc, by the way, about what to do with Upton. What do you want him to do as a Tigers fan and even an outsider looking?
I already forgot what we say.
We did talk about it, because Marlo Alter responded to us on Twitter and liked the conversation. So we don't want to totally repeat everything.
Yeah.
But we did talk about Upton, whether or not he will opt out, and really the repercussions of it. Because if he does opt out, I explained to the masses last week on the podcast that it's not good for the Tigers. It spells disaster, because you already lost JD Martinez. You've got an aging Miguel Cabrera, a way past his prime Victor Martinez in the very last stages of his Major League Baseball career. So who's going to hit for you in the middle of that order? If you lose Justin Upton, you're going to really be dying for runs on a nightly basis, because they're going to be hard to come by. And that won't be good from an offensive standpoint for the Tigers, and from a standpoint of the Tigers being able to win consistently next season. And with that, Doc, we'll take a quick commercial break here on episode number 102 of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. Doc, as you know, our newest sponsor at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network is the East Side Youth Sports Foundation. And if there's one thing we know, Doc, it is that Detroit fans really love sports. That is why you are listening. Whether you're an armchair jock or an all-star player, you can help the next generation get into the game too. The Eastside Youth Sports Foundation provides opportunities for boys and girls alike to experience a variety of sports like baseball, football, yoga, and hockey. Because kids who play together stay together, making new friends, learning teamwork, and making better choices. Girls and boys who are actively engaged in sports do better in school, live healthier lifestyles, and make better choices. So how can you help? Well, support the Eastside Youth Sports Foundation in its upcoming Try Sports for Free Day, September 23rd. Sign up your son or daughter, volunteer, or make a donation. Last year, the Foundation's Try Sports for Free Day introduced nearly 200 kids to new activities. Learn more about the Eastside Youth Sports Foundation at ESYSF.com. That is, once again, ESYSF.com. And back here on episode number 102 of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company, I am your host, Vito, Jerome Chirco, alongside my usual sidekick and partner in crime, that is the Doc from Doc and Jock, John Charles Macaroon. And John, before the break, we talked about Justin Upton, whether or not he will opt out, the repercussions of it potentially. Marlo Alter really liked the discussion once again last week when we had it. He expressed his comments, regarding our conversation last week on Twitter. So it's cool to see that from Marlo, a colleague of mine at the Free Press. And we also had some stuff to talk about, my trip to Chicago and to Wrigley Field, most notably, where I witnessed a Cubs game against the Washington Nationals. Edwin Jackson, by the way, on the mound for the Nats against John Lackey of the Chicago Cubbies. And I saw Alex Avila get the starting nod at catcher and go deep to straight center. I mean, he killed the ball, and the fans were loud and proud as a result of it, obviously. And it was good to see him succeed, as that was Avila's first ever hit as a Cubby. So his first ever hit playing for a National League ball club. So really cool to see him hit that deep shot to straight center.
It was a weekend game, 1 o'clock start, right?
Saturday, early start time, and a splendid time that Nick and I had. Nick Schmiegel, another name drop for him, as he was with me on the trip. We went to the game together, just him and I. And I did not drink any cerveza, did not dabble into that, and had a water, though, had a Wrigley dog, which was good. And Nick and I had a, it sounds corny, but we had a grand old time watching.
Was your first time at Wrigley?
First time since I was 10 or something. It's been a very long time
since
I've
been
to Wrigley.
I've been there one time too,
yeah?
And it was a nice. You definitely get a chance to take in the ambiance. You check out the outfield. You check out the history of the stadium, the vibe. The crowd seems to be really active in a lot of the games. It just seems like a fun place to watch a baseball game, and good for you. And it was very interesting. So Justin Wilson didn't get into the game?
Justin Wilson did get into the game.
Oh.
He didn't look that effective. He got out of a jam, but wasn't purely effective or sharpest. Yeah. But, he's no Andrew Miller. I've said that many times. That's why I like the Tigers' haul. Not to go back into that conversation, but I don't think it was too bad of a haul, because I think Wilson is prone to innings like he had on Saturday against the Nats, who, let me just straighten this out, the Nats are a great offensive ball club. You have Bryce Harper, who killed a ball for a home run, by the way, on Saturday. He did against John Lackey. Killed it, smoked it to right field. That was great to see, his power. And then his powerful arm. He threw out a runner, Doc, and everybody listening, from right field to third base. It was an absolute cannon of a throw, accurate throw, one bounce to third base. Anthony Rendon, a great slugger himself, playing third base for the Nats on Saturday, he had the swipe tag. He had to apply that tag as a swipe kind of tag to get the guy out running to third base. So that was like an immaculately accurate throw, one of the most accurate throws I've ever seen. On the money, one hop to Rendon, and Rendon, like I said, with the great swipe tag. So it was a great two-way play there defensively from Bryce Harper and then Anthony Rendon at third base for the Nats.
So what was it like being in the stadium? What was the ambiance like? What were you kind of observing? I know you were definitely invested heavily in the action. What was it like being at Wrigley Field?
The ambiance was a lively one. I mean, it was an active crowd. An amped-up crowd, and especially once they started hitting the heck out of Edwin Jackson, who lasted a little bit longer than I thought, but he's an innings guy, an innings eater. He's not going to be the most effective guy that's going to throw a no-hitter or something, even though he has thrown a no-hitter, throwing like 120-plus pitches in the past, the way past, though, now. But anyways, it was exciting, too, because those two teams are two of the strongest in the entire National League, in all of baseball, truly. The Nats have a great shot to make the World Series. The Cubs have a great shot to defend their World Series title from last year. And by adding Jose Quintana, Justin Wilson, and Alex Avila to the roster they had coming into the season. I think they've stacked up well enough to make that run again all the way to the Fall Classic and to win it all for a second straight year, which would be something after the long drought they had of never making, well, even the World Series or winning a World Series title then too, to be able to make it possibly 2 straight years. Could you imagine Wrigleyville and how amped up they would be for a second straight trip back to the Fall Classic?
Ooh-wee. So how does Wrigley compare to Comerica? Comerica's definitely newer. It's a very advanced ballpark. It definitely has great sight lines. I really have never really had a bad time at Comerica. I enjoy it. I feel like Detroit has really a crown jewel in Comerica. I really enjoy baseball there. Great sight lines. I mean, you could sit in the first 5 rows, the upper deck. You can see great. I really enjoy it. Now the prices, obviously for beer and stuff like that.
But they're expensive anywhere.
They're expensive.
They were expensive at Wrigley Field too.
But at the same time, you can walk right outside and get $1 peanuts, $1 waters right outside there from the vendors, and it's very nice in terms of, at least from all the interactions I've had with Comerica security staff and the people that are at the ticket gates. They've been very nice. They let you just, as long as nothing is open, you can carry in peanuts, water, and bring in stuff into the ballpark. I've never really had any issues with the staff or anybody in regards to Comerica Park. I've really enjoyed it. It's been fun. What was the ambiance like? What's the differences or similarities that Wrigley has to Comerica?
By the way, truly expensive, just like Comerica Park. I got a water on Saturday for $5.25. Yeah, that's not fun. Never fun. But at Comerica Park, you have to pay a pretty penny, too, for a drink of alcohol or a water. So, Little Caesars Pizza. It's hilarious how, you can get a hot and ready, right, for $5 at a regular Little Caesars pizza place. Then you go to Comerica Park, and it's what?
$8.25 or something?
A lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're not getting a large pizza. Or, you're not getting as many slices. Or it's more money, a lot more money. And yeah, the quantity isn't nearly what it is for $5 when you spend it at another Little Caesars pizza establishment. But it's not worth it going on a diatribe right now about Comerica Park and its prices because, once again, you go to Wrigley Field, a great ballpark with the nostalgic feel to it, the history behind it, and you still have to pay a pretty penny. But it's about going to the game, enjoying yourself as much as possible while you're there, and enjoying the atmosphere surrounding you in Wrigleyville. Because Wrigleyville, when you walk outside of Wrigley Field, the ambience there, too. Ambience there is terrific. It really is. And there's a different vibe, definitely, when you walk into Wrigleyville and when you walk into the surrounding areas of Comerica Park.
Fascinating. Maybe one day you'll invite me to a trip to Chicago and I'll get an opportunity to go hang out and have a good time with the fellas. Because, it's been a long time for me. And I had been now to what's called the Guaranteed Rate Field where the White Sox played, and it was a very fun time there as well, but I definitely probably need to check back in with Wrigley pretty soon. All right, to end the podcast, heavy debate, a lot of talk on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast. People are watching and they're noticing what's going on with Miggy because if he's hurt or if he's denying anything that's wrong with him, his performance, whatever the cause is right now, and we'll delve into that just a little bit, his performance is hurting the team. And I've always said that, and Al Willman, former Detroit News freelancer, kind of came on here and said the same thing. Part of the reason why the Tigers are struggling is their inconsistency on offense, led by Miguel Cabrera, who has struggled mightily. I mean, versus Pittsburgh, not consistent at all. And some people are starting to notice, and they've messaged us on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast. They've said it kind of looks like Miggy's checked out. It kind of looks like his effort level is not there. It seems like something's off. He might be hurt. He was given a day off on Sunday. It doesn't look like it's done a whole heck of a lot for him. People are getting concerned because he's around that age now, 34 years old, where many great star athletes start to have that nosedive. Again, I said last year we should have traded Miguel Cabrera when he was performing, not because I thought at the time he was a malcontent or at the time I thought that he was not producing. I kind of just went with experience. Albert Pujols signed a massive deal, and he was an MVP caliber player, a future Hall of Famer. He fell off. And I go, well, Miguel Cabrera is kind of approaching that. I thought Avila could have been a little bit creative and maybe moved Miggy last year. Adam laughed at me. Now he's giving me credit, knowing that right now, this is going to be one of his worst seasons in a long time.
His worst one ever. Worse than his rookie season with the Marlins. Through 96 games, he has a career worst wins above replacement mark of 0. 0.0 is his WAR right now, according to BaseballReference.com, with almost 100 games played this season by Miguel Cabrera. How bad is that? Well, that's absolutely bad. It's not bearable from a guy that's making as much money as he is annually until 2023 at 34, I'm going to say years old, because he's not a young chicken. He doesn't look like it, how he's playing out there. And maybe, you know what? The long ball, his numbers with the home run productivity have been affected from his slumps this year. Only 13 home runs and nearly, once again, 100 games played by Miguel this season. At least Albert Pujols, on the downside, way downside of his career, is still belting home runs at a fairly premium rate. Miguel Cabrera is not getting lift on the ball and hitting it out of the ballpark nearly enough to warrant the contract that he is making right now either. So he's not doing anything right out there. Defensively, he's a shell of what he used to be, which wasn't great anyways at first base or at third base back in the day, truly. So when you have that already, a factor that you take into account that his defense wasn't even great when he was truly in his prime, and now his offense is tailing off significantly, well, that screams at you that he might be on the downside of his career more than we thought coming into this season, which once again makes that contract, which is already hugely enormous, and makes it even more of an albatross of a contract than we thought, than we perceived it was coming into the 2017 campaign, Doc.
Is Miguel Cabrera done?
I'm going to say no, because remember, too, he might be stricken by some nagging injuries that are affecting his at-the-plate productivity. But the thing is to remember what's going on at home for him in his native Venezuela. Supposedly, it's not very safe. It's very dangerous over there right now. It's an upheaval. So when that's the case, you know what? It very well could be on his mind as he goes from game to game. So he might be slowing down a little bit as a player with his on-the-field productivity. So he just might not be the same going forward because of, well, age and nagging injuries, which he's battled through and played through for numerous years now, coming into the season. But it also might be issues that he is battling back home with his native Venezuela, seeing what's going on over there, where it's very unsafe, and that could be mentally affecting him game to game. So there might be more going on, circulating through that head of Miguel Cabrera, and affecting his productivity on a consistent basis than nagging injuries.
So I know Detroit can be sometimes nasty. Do you think if this continues, let's say he's around a 265 hitter, let's just say a 20% reduction in productivity, he's making $30 million a year.
Yeah.
Do you see potentially Miguel Cabrera becoming a villain in the great state of Michigan, Tigers fans? Do you see a scenario in which Tigers fans could turn on Miguel Cabrera if the struggles continue?
Absolutely. Fans will turn on you when you decline in productivity, and fans have already decided to turn on Miguel Cabrera because of a lack of productivity this season seen by him at the plate. So he's got to display more of it consistently.
If in 2 years...
I don't boo.
6 years, $184 million remaining.
Next year, though, I think is a time when those fans who are on the fence about whether or not to continue to cheer on Miguel Cabrera through all these slumps this season for him offensively, I think next year is a season when fans truly start to turn on Miguel Cabrera, throw him to the curbside. So we've seen something already with fans starting to turn to the dark side, perhaps a Star Wars reference there a little bit. But I think you'll see a huge number of fans really turn on Miguel Cabrera next season. If these struggles at the plate from Miguel continue to persist, I think you're going to see a huge number of fans turn on him in 2018.
Ooh, Vito. I don't want to see stuff like that happening, but Detroit's a rough town. When you're making $30 million a year, you got to perform, and when it's a situation where Miguel Cabrera is earning a big chunk of money and people are expecting great things from him, the offense kind of goes a little bit as he goes. There hasn't been a guy yet to kind of carry the load outside of Justin Upton.
But now if you lose him, it's all on Miguel Cabrera's shoulders next year again. And guess what? If he's struggling like he has this season so far through almost 100 games played by Miguel, guess what? The Tigers' offense is SOL. Isn't it? Big time, Doc. And that's why you could see the Tigers losing 90 to 100 games next year. If this offense really is as bad as it has been this year, well, speaking of Miguel Cabrera and Victor Martinez specifically, because the offense, when you had JD, you had him and Upton. But now, if those two guys, that is Victor Martinez and Miguel Cabrera, are as anemic offensively as they have been this year, come next year, and you lose Justin Upton because he opts out, because you know the Tigers aren't going to try to re-sign him if he does indeed opt out. So if you lose Upton, and you have these guys being as anemic offensively as they have been up to this point in this Major League season, well, then you have some trouble on your hands, and you're going to lose a lot of games, and once again, maybe even in the 90 to 100 game range.
But at the same time, that's what we need. You got to struggle to get those prospects.
Well, that's why you talk about Justin Upton. That's why there is a conversation, right? The big debate right now on Twitter and just circulating all over the place. It is, would you rather have him opt out so you pretty much can tank next year? Because you really will, by default, by losing Justin Upton's services with him opting out, if he does opt out. So remember that, too.
Man, great podcast, Vito. Always enjoy talking baseball with you. Yeah, I just can't. Some people are like, oh, I don't want to talk about the Tigers. They struggle. There's not a lot of storylines. Dude, if you just watch the team, you could just pick 2 players every week and just start talking about what we're seeing and observing. I love talking baseball with you. You're one of the rare people that I enjoy talking baseball with, and I look forward to every time that we get a chance to record the Tigers Talk podcast. Thank you to all the sponsors. We greatly appreciate it. Thanks to everybody that votes in our polls and supports us on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast. I believe one of the most interactive Detroit sports Twitter pages out there. If you can find it in your heart, Vito is running a charity baseball game. Definitely check out where you can go donate to Make-A-Wish. A lot of support so far early on, and continue support to you, Vito, in your goal to hit $2,000 to donate this Saturday to Make-A-Wish Michigan.
Thank you. Looking forward to it. It is being hosted Saturday starting at 3 p.m. in Dearborn at the Dearborn Ford Community and Performing Arts Center at King Boring Field, a charity softball game being hosted with all the proceeds going towards Make-A-Wish Michigan. Should be fun. Donate, please, if you can. The link is on my Twitter page, at Vito Jerome on Twitter, and at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network's Twitter handle, at Detroit Podcast. Thank you, guys. Adios.
And you can download all the other podcasts on our fine network 24/7 on demand. Check out the other podcast, DetroitSportsPodcast.com.